I've spent my entire career listening to the things most people ignore. As a wildlife researcher, you learn that nature is never actually quiet. There's always a hum, a rustle, a pulse. But 3 weeks ago, when the comet appears, the world did something it's not supposed to do. It went silent. I thought I was looking at a scientific anomaly. But after digging through some archived files on the dark web, I realized the silence wasn't a side effect. It was a choice. I'm going to share exactly what I found. But fair warning, you might want to turn the volume down for this one. This is what happens when the planet stops breathing. And also, if you enjoy these videos, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment down below telling me your opinion about the story.
I'm a wildlife acoustics researcher. Since the comet appeared, every animal on Earth has gone silent. I think I know why. I found the truth on the dark web. When I was 8, my dad took me camping in northern Michigan. It was one of those state park sites with gravel pads and splintered picnic tables. Nothing dramatic. I remember waking up before sunrise because I had to pee and being too scared to leave the tent alone. The air was freezing, that kind that makes your nose sting. And what I remember most, what stuck with me for years, was how loud everything was. Birds. So many birds. Layers of sound like someone slowly turning up the volume on the world. Warblers, crows, something trilling from high in the trees. It felt alive. I didn't know the word ecosystem yet, but I understood that sound meant safety. It meant the world was doing what it was supposed to do. Then, just for a second, maybe 5 seconds, maybe less, it all stopped. No wind, no birds, nothing. I remember gripping the zipper of the tent and feeling this wave of panic I couldn't explain. It came back a moment later, the noise, like someone had hit play again. But I never forgot that pause, that unnatural gap. I've been chasing sound ever since, which is why what's happening now doesn't just feel scientific. It feels wrong in that same instinctual way. I'm a wildlife acoustics researcher. My entire job is listening to the planet breathe. And 3 weeks ago, right after the comet became visible in the night sky, the breathing stopped. Not faded. Stopped. I was in Wyoming, working near Yellowstone, running long-term passive acoustic monitors. They're basically weatherproof recorders strapped to trees, designed to capture everything: wolves, elk, insects, even distant river flow. Forests are never silent, even at 3 a.m., even in winter. There's always something. A rustle, a hum, a pulse. The first flat waveform I saw, I assumed it was a dead unit. By the third one, I felt that same childhood panic creeping up my spine. The silence began at 9:42 p.m. on a Tuesday. We triple-checked the timestamp because it lined up almost exactly with the comet's brightest visible pass over North America. Before that minute, our spectrograms were dense. Owl calls, wind, distant coyote yips. After that minute, a straight line. No birds, no insects, no movement. I stepped outside the cabin the next morning, expecting to prove the equipment wrong. It was worse in person. Yellowstone at dawn is supposed to feel crowded with sound. Instead, it felt staged. Like one of those nature documentary scenes before the CGI gets added in. trees swaying, but no flutter of wings. No distant elk. Even the river nearby sounded muted, like someone had thrown a blanket over it. Marcus, my field partner, didn't joke about it. That's how I knew it was serious. "You hear anything?" I asked. He stood there for a full 10 seconds before answering. No. By the end of the week, it wasn't just us. Reports came in from Oregon, Florida, Germany, Japan. Zoos said animals weren't vocalizing. Pet owners posted videos of dogs sitting still, ears angled upward at night, not barking, not whining, just listening. Social media brushed it off at first. Seasonal changes, migration patterns, conspiracy bait. Then someone stitched together before and after audio clips from a rainforest live stream in Brazil. Before, layered frogs, insects, birds. After, nothing but faint wind. The thread disappeared within hours. News anchors started using phrases like unprecedented behavioral anomaly. NASA insisted the comet posed no radiation threat, no atmospheric disturbance, no measurable electromagnetic interference. But the comet kept getting brighter, and the animals stayed silent. When I flew back to Chicago to present preliminary findings, I noticed something small that hit harder than the field data. There were no birds in O'Hare. If you've ever actually paid attention, you'll know airports always have them. Little sparrows nesting in rafters, occasional flutters near the ceiling. I've recorded them before, just out of habit. The air felt hollow without them. That's when the messages started. An Instagram account with no photo, no posts, just numbers for a name. "You're looking in the wrong direction." I ignored it. Second message came seconds later. "They aren't silent because they're afraid." That sentence has been looping in my head ever since. Because fear makes animals loud. Alarm calls, warning cries, defensive noises. Silence like this, it's coordinated. That night in my hotel room, unable to sleep, I made the mistake of checking Reddit. There were already threads buried in r/conspiracy and r/biology, cross-posting about global fauna suppression. Someone mentioned obscure government contracts with acoustic research labs. Someone else linked to a .onion forum claiming to have archived pre-silence recordings. And then my phone buzzed again. The numbers account sent a link. It ended in .onion. And a final message. They're not quiet because of the comet. They're quiet because they can hear it. I don't scare easily. I've spent nights alone in forests with nothing but a headlamp and a recorder. But sitting there in a downtown Chicago hotel room, staring at that link while the sky outside glowed faintly from city lights and the comet hung just above the skyline, I felt like that 8-year-old kid again, waiting for the birds to start singing. I clicked it. I didn't know what I expected. A blank page, a scam. Some edgy conspiracy board with stock photos and broken English. Instead, the page loaded clean. Black background, minimal interface. No ads, no usernames visible unless you clicked into a thread. Just a title at the top. Listeners. There were hundreds of active users. The main pinned post read, Global Event Archive, Phase 2 Confirmations. My stomach tightened. I scrolled. The first thing I noticed wasn't the text. It was the audio files. Thousands of them. Each labeled by location and timestamp. Yellowstone, Kyoto, Sao Paulo, Nairobi, Reykjavik, Antarctica research stations, remote oil rigs, suburban backyards, all of them uploaded within minutes of each other, all of them post-silence. I clicked one at random. Des Moines, Iowa, 2:13 Central Standard Time. The waveform loaded, flat. Then, at the very bottom of the interface, a toggle option. Normalize and amplify, 5,000%. I hesitated. Every rational part of my brain told me not to treat this like some horror ARG. This was probably a curated collection of public live streams edited for effect. I toggled it anyway. At first, nothing changed. Just a thin hiss, like distant static. Then I heard it. It was so low, I thought it was my laptop fan. A tone. Not a clean tone. Not like feedback or a sine wave. It wavered. Subharmonic. Pulsing just below the threshold of comfortable hearing. Around 17 hertz. Maybe lower. It made my jaw ache before I consciously registered it. I ripped my headphones off instinctively. The room felt smaller. I put them back on. Adjusted the EQ manually this time, isolating the low frequency band. The tone wasn't constant. It oscillated in intervals. 3 pulses. Pause. 2 pulses. Longer pause. Then a cluster of irregular vibrations that didn't follow any natural acoustic pattern I've ever studied. It wasn't random. It was structured. And it was present in every file. I opened Yellowstone. Same pattern. Tokyo. Same pattern. Rural Kenya. Same pattern. It didn't matter whether the recording was taken in a forest, desert, city rooftop, or inside a zoo enclosure. The tone was there. Everywhere. Global. Synchronized. My hands were shaking, but not in a dramatic way. It was subtle. The kind of tremor you only notice when you're trying to click something precisely. There was a comment thread under the main archive. Most posts were clinical. Frequency breakdowns, spectrogram overlays, cross-reference timestamps. These weren't conspiracy theorists. These were engineers, acoustic analysts, amateur radio operators. One user posted, "Pattern aligns with Comet's rotational period." Another replied, "Not possible. Object is 34 million miles away." Response: Distance irrelevant if carrier medium isn't electromagnetic. That sentence sat in my brain like a nail. Carrier medium. Sound requires a medium. Space is vacuum. Unless... No. I kept reading. A user named Nullfield had written a long analysis. I won't quote it fully, but the core argument was this. The tone wasn't coming from Earth. It wasn't coming through air. It was coming through matter. Low frequency vibrational resonance traveling through the planet itself. Crust, mantle, ocean mass. Everything conducting it like a massive speaker diaphragm. The comet wasn't emitting light we could see. It was emitting pressure waves too low for humans to consciously perceive at normal amplification. But animals could. Of course they could. Elephants communicate infrasonically over miles. Whales navigate with frequencies humans barely register. Even birds rely on subtle atmospheric pressure cues. If the entire planet had become saturated in a continuous infrasonic signal, I thought about the zoo footage. The lion staring at the horizon, not frozen in fear, listening. I opened another thread. This one wasn't analytical. It was titled, Human Response Phase Starting. The original poster claimed prolonged exposure to amplified versions of the tone caused side effects. Insomnia, nausea, persistent pressure behind the eyes, a sense of being watched from above. Most replies dismissed it. Then someone posted a video. I shouldn't have watched it. It was filmed in what looked like a basement. Concrete walls. Single hanging bulb. The camera was propped up on a workbench. A man sat in front of it, mid-30s, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes. I boosted it, he said calmly, just to see. He described isolating the infrasonic band and routing it through a subwoofer system. I wanted to feel what they're hearing. He smiled when he said that. Behind him, against the wall, were 3 large dog crates, empty. They stopped moving first, he continued. Then they started facing the same direction. He turned the camera slightly. The crates weren't empty. They were open. The dogs were standing outside them, perfectly still. All 3 facing the same corner of the room, not looking at the man, not reacting to his voice, just staring upward at the ceiling. The man laughed softly. It's like they're waiting. The video cut abruptly. The thread underneath it was locked. I realized something else then. The forum wasn't hidden because it was fringe. It was hidden because it was being monitored. There were timestamps showing posts deleted within seconds. Users disappearing mid-conversation. Someone was trying to contain this. I checked the Comet's live tracker on NASA's site. It had adjusted trajectory slightly, closer than originally projected. Still, no threat. The tone in my headphones shifted. I froze. I hadn't closed the Yellowstone file. The pulsing pattern had changed. 3 pulses. Pause. 2 pulses. Pause. Then a new sequence. Longer. Denser. I checked the timestamp. Live feed. The archive wasn't static. It was updating in real time. The pattern was evolving. I opened a spectrogram overlay. The frequency band was narrowing, becoming more precise, like tuning. My hotel room felt wrong. I can't describe it better than that. The air pressure felt heavier, even though I knew that was psychosomatic. My ears popped faintly, like I was descending in an airplane. Outside the window, Chicago's skyline was bright and sterile. No birds. No movement in the sky except the comet, faint but visible between buildings. My phone vibrated again. Unknown number this time. No caller ID. I let it ring. It stopped. Then a text came through. No number attached. Just text. Stop amplifying it. My chest went cold. I hadn't told anyone what I was doing. The forum required tour. VPN. Encrypted connection. Another message. They don't want you to isolate the carrier. I stared at the screen for a full minute before typing. Who is this? 3 dots appeared immediately. You already know. The room's smoke detector chirped once. Not a full alarm, just a sharp electronic click. I looked up instinctively. There was nothing there, but I had the sudden, irrational certainty that if I removed the ceiling panel, I would find something listening back. My laptop speakers emitted a low vibration. Not loud, just enough that I could feel it in the desk beneath my palms. I hadn't turned on external audio. The file was still routed to my headphones. The waveform on screen spiked. For the first time since opening the archive, it wasn't flat. There was a new layer. Higher frequency. Barely within audible range. It sounded like distant whispering. Not words. More like overlapping breaths. I muted everything. The sound continued. Not through the laptop. Through the room. It was faint. Almost imagined. But it was there. A low, synchronized hum that felt less like sound and more like internal vibration. My vision blurred slightly at the edges. Pressure behind my eyes. My phone buzzed again. Final message. They're quiet because they're responding. I don't remember standing up. I just remember being at the window, looking at the comet. It didn't look silver blue anymore. It looked textured, like something moving within its tail. My reflection in the glass looked wrong. For a split second, my head was tilted upward at a sharper angle than my body, like the dogs in the basement video. I forced myself to look away, back at the laptop. The forum page refreshed automatically. A new pinned post appeared. Phase 3, Human Alignment. And underneath it, auditory threshold decreasing globally. My ears rang. Not the normal kind. It was rhythmic. 3 pulses. Pause. 2 pulses. Longer pause. I realized then why the animals had gone silent. It wasn't fear. It wasn't paralysis. It was attention. Complete, absolute attention directed upward towards something calling across a frequency we were never meant to hear. And now I could. Just barely. Enough to understand that the signal wasn't random. It was counting. And whatever it was counting down to, it wasn't for them. It was for us. I didn't sleep. Not even for a second. I turned off every device in the hotel room. Laptop shut. Phone powered down. TV unplugged. I even pulled the plug on the mini fridge because the low electrical hum suddenly felt suspicious. I needed silence that I could trust. The problem is, once you learn to recognize something, you can't unhear it. The rhythm was still there. Faint, not coming from a speaker. Not from the walls. From inside. It felt like my inner ear had become a tuning fork. 3 pulses. Pause. 2 pulses. Longer pause. Over and over. Around 4 a.m., I gave up pretending it wasn't happening and walked looked outside. Downtown Chicago. Before sunrise is strange. Street sweepers moving like slow insects. A couple arguing outside a closed bar. Steam rising from grates. It should have felt normal. It didn't. People were off. Not dramatic. Not possessed. Just subtly wrong. At a 24-hour McDonald's across the street, the drive-through line was longer than it should have been at that hour. Cars weren't moving. Just idling. Headlights on. No one honking. Inside, a man stood at the counter holding a coffee, not drinking it, just staring at the digital menu board. His head was tilted slightly upward. Same angle, not exaggerated. Just enough that once you notice it, you can't stop seeing it. I stepped closer to him than I normally would. "Hey," I said. "You okay?" He blinked slowly. His pupils looked wide, too wide for fluorescent lighting. "Do you hear it?" he asked. He didn't look at me when he said it. His eyes were fixed somewhere above the menu. "I don't know what you mean," I lied. He smiled faintly. "They're almost done." A McDonald's employee called out an order number. No one responded. The employee repeated it louder. Still nothing. 5 people in line, all staring slightly upward. All still. I left. Back outside, I noticed something worse. It wasn't just the absence of birds anymore. It was the absence of small, random human noise. No car alarms in the distance. No dogs barking from apartment windows. Even the city's usual chaotic layering felt thinned out, like someone had filtered out certain frequencies. I checked my phone once I powered it back on. 23 missed calls, most from Marcus. 3 from Dr. Rao. 1 from my mum. A voicemail from Marcus came in as soon as the signal stabilized. I played it while walking. His breathing was uneven. "It's not just wildlife anymore," he said. "We're getting reports from livestock operations. Cattle are lining up against fence lines, all facing east." He paused. "They're not eating." Another pause. "Some of them walked into a lake yesterday. Just kept going. No thrashing, no panic." The call cut out. I stopped walking. The lake thing. That wasn't paralysis. That wasn't fear. That was obedience. My phone buzzed again. Not the unknown number this time. An email. Subject line, RE, alignment study. Confidential. I never sent that. The sender was a .gov address. The body of the email was short. "Your field correlates with our independent findings. You are advised to cease independent signal amplification. Further interference may accelerate threshold breach." Threshold breach. I typed back without thinking. What threshold? The response came less than a minute later. Collective perceptual entrainment. That phrase made my throat dry. Entrainment is when biological rhythms synchronize with an external stimulus. It happens in neuroscience. Cardiac cells. Fireflies flashing in unison. It's not supposed to happen globally across species, unless the stimulus is strong enough. I opened the Comet tracker again. Its proximity hadn't changed drastically, but its brightness had increased. There were new images circulating on astronomy forums. High-resolution captures showing irregularities along its surface. Not craters, patterns. Linear formations that didn't look geological. More like segmentation. I forced myself to focus. Data, evidence, not paranoia. I called Dr. Rao. She answered immediately. "You feel it too?" she said before I could speak. "Yes. It's stronger today." "Have you amplified it again?" "No," she said quickly. "But I don't think amplification matters anymore." There was something in her voice I'd never heard before. Not fear, resignation. "We ran controlled exposure tests on lab rodents," she continued. "Shielded environment, isolated from external audio. And?" They began orienting in unison at 3:12 local time. "That's impossible." They were underground. The call crackled. "You need to consider," she said carefully, "that this isn't a sound in the conventional sense." The line went dead. I went back to the hotel room and turned the laptop on again. The forum had changed. No more open threads. Just one live feed window. Black background. White text updating in real time. Global human response metrics. I felt nauseous reading it. Urban centers. 3% upward gaze fixation sustained beyond 10 minutes. Rural zones. 8% sustained orientation. Sleep disruption index rising. They were tracking us. Not just animals. Us. A new line appeared. Early cognitive bleed-through reported. Underneath it, a live chat scrolled. People describing intrusive thoughts. Repetitive dreams of standing in fields at night, an urge to walk toward open spaces. A compulsion to look at the comet directly, even though it strained their eyes. One post froze me. "My daughter hasn't spoken all morning. She's just humming. It's the same rhythm. 3 pulses. Pause. 2 pulses. Longer pause." I minimized the window and looked at my own reflection in the laptop screen. My head wasn't tilted. Not yet. But my jaw felt tight, like I'd been clenching it for hours. The pressure behind my eyes intensified. I grabbed a decibel meter app and held it up. No abnormal readings. Of course not. This wasn't airborne sound. This was deeper. My phone vibrated again. "Marcus." I answered immediately. His voice was barely audible. "They're moving now," he said. "Who?" "The elk." My pulse spiked. "Moving how?" "They left the tree line. All of them. Hundreds." "To where?" "Open ground." I could hear wind through his receiver. And something else. A faint, low hum. Even over the compressed phone audio, I recognized the pattern. "Marcus," I said carefully, "do not follow them." He didn't respond right away. "I just want to see," he said finally. His tone had changed, flattened. "You need to get indoors," I said. "Now." "They look peaceful," he whispered. The line filled with static. Then I heard it. Not through my room, through his phone. A collective exhale. hundreds of animals breathing in sync. And then, nothing. The call dropped. I called back immediately. No answer. Texted. No delivery confirmation. I tried tracking his phone through the shared field app. Location last pinged near a meadow outside the park boundary, then offline. I stared at the blinking cursor in the chat window of the forum. A new update appeared. Human alignment crossing 5% in multiple cities. I felt it then, a subtle shift in my own posture. Not dramatic, just a slight inclination upward. My eyes drifting toward the ceiling without conscious intent. I forced them down. The pressure intensified when I resisted, like pushing against a current. My breathing started syncing with the rhythm without me meaning to. Inhale. Pause. Exhale. Pause. 3. 2. Longer pause. I slapped my own face lightly to break it. It helped for maybe 5 seconds. Then the urge returned. Not a command. An invitation. That's what made it worse. It didn't feel violent. It felt patient. Like something unimaginably vast was waiting for us to finish noticing. The Comet tracker refreshed automatically. New advisory banner. Unscheduled atmospheric phenomena detected. There were reports of subtle vibrations felt in high-rise buildings. No earthquakes registered. Just tremors without seismic origin. I walked to the window again. The sky was brighter now. Too bright for early morning. The comet was visible even in daylight. And for the first time, I saw movement. Not in the tail, in the core. A ripple. Slow, deliberate, like something adjusting. My phone buzzed one last time. Unknown number again. A single message. They're teaching you the rhythm. My hands went cold. Because I realized something I hadn't let myself think before. This wasn't a countdown. It wasn't summoning. It wasn't attack. It was synchronization. And once enough of us aligned, the next phase wouldn't require animals anymore. It would require something louder. By noon, the world felt thinner. That's the only word that fits. Not darker. Not louder. Thinner. Like reality had been stretched too tight over something underneath, and any second it might tear. The forum updated again. Major metropolitan alignment exceeding 11% sustained. There was a live heat map now. Red clusters pulsing over cities like infected tissue. Chicago was glowing faintly. I left the hotel because staying inside felt like suffocating in a sealed container with the rhythm. Elevators were packed with people standing too still. No one scrolling. No one talking. Just that faint, upward drift of their gaze when they thought no one was watching. In the lobby, a television displayed emergency coverage. Not panic. Carefully worded advisories. Citizens are encouraged to avoid extended direct observation of the comet. As if that was the issue. Outside, the air vibrated. Not audibly. Physically. I could feel it in my teeth. Cars were abandoned mid-lane. Not crashed. Just stopped. doors open, engines still running in some of them. I passed a Starbucks where every single person inside stood facing the front window, drinks untouched, condensation sliding down cups onto the counter, baristas too, all looking upward through the glass. No one blinked. The sky was pale blue, washed out, and the comet was visible even against daylight, brighter than it had any right to be. It no longer looked distant. It looked close enough to press a thumb against. My phone buzzed with emergency alerts. Unexplained mass behavioral event. Seek enclosed shelter. Too late. A woman stepped off the curb in front of me without looking. She didn't react to the honking car inches from her. She just walked forward slowly, head tilted. "Mom," I said, grabbing her arm. Her skin was cold, not temperature cold, unresponsive cold. Her eyes flicked toward me for half a second, and in that half second, I saw recognition. Not of me, of interruption. "You're behind," she said calmly. Behind what? She pulled free with unnatural strength and continued walking toward an open intersection where dozens of others were gathering. They weren't clustering randomly. They were spacing themselves evenly. Perfect distances, like nodes in a grid. I stepped back. My breathing had already started matching it again. 3. Pause. 2. Longer pause. The pressure in my skull sharpened. Not painful, but invasive. Like fingers gently pressing against the inside of my thoughts. A siren wailed somewhere in the distance, then cut off abruptly. Not fading. Cut. I forced myself into a nearby parking garage, concrete swallowing the sky. The vibration dulled slightly inside, but didn't stop. I leaned against a pillar and tried to think like a scientist. Entrainment requires feedback. A system syncing to a signal becomes part of that signal. If enough biological entities synchronize, they amplify the carrier. We weren't victims. We were becoming transmitters. My phone lit up again. The .gov address. Containment failed. Human amplification accelerating phase transition. I typed back with shaking fingers. What transition? The response came slower this time. Acoustic coherence threshold. That phrase felt clinical, almost harmless, until I understood it. When enough oscillators align in phase, their amplitude compounds. It's basic physics. A million whispers in perfect sync become a roar. I ran back outside. The intersection I'd seen earlier was full now. Not chaotic, organized. Hundreds of people standing in concentric rings. No chanting. No screaming. Just breathing. Together. A child in the center of the formation began humming. Soft. Barely audible. Others joined. Not consciously. It rose gradually, like a stadium crowd warming up. Not melody. Frequency. The same pattern. The ground beneath my feet vibrated harder. Windows in surrounding buildings began to tremble. Hairline cracks spidered across glass. I covered my ears. But it wasn't a sound you could block. It was internal. Their hum grew deeper, synchronized perfectly. Someone collapsed near the outer ring, not from panic, from overload. His nose bled steadily, but he didn't wipe it away. He stayed standing on his knees, head tilted, blood dripping onto concrete in rhythmic pulses matching the pattern. I wanted to run. Instead, I stepped closer, because part of me needed to see it. The hum shifted. It elongated. The pauses shortened. The rhythm tightening. My own chest started vibrating in response. I realized with a cold clarity that if I let myself fully relax into it, the pressure would stop feeling invasive. It would feel natural, like slipping underwater and finally letting your lungs fill. A police helicopter hovered above the city. For a moment, its blades disrupted the air. Then it faltered. The aircraft wobbled mid-air, then veered sharply away, as if the pilot had lost orientation. The crowd didn't react. They were beyond reacting. They were aligning. The comet brightened again. Not visually explosive, just closer. As if depth perception itself had changed. And then I saw it. Not in the sky. In the reflection of a glass building across the street. The comet's tail wasn't trailing randomly anymore. It was structured, segmented into repeating ridges. Each ridge pulsing faintly in time with the crowd's hum. Call, response. The grid formation tightened. People adjusted their spacing without looking down. Subtle half steps, micro corrections, perfect geometry. The child in the center stopped humming. Everyone else continued. The frequency peaked. The air felt electrically charged, like right before a lightning strike. Then, a crack. Not thunder. Concrete. A fissure split the intersection, running clean and straight through the center of the formation. No one moved. The hum didn't stop. The fissure widened slowly, revealing darkness beneath asphalt. Not soil, not sewer lines, just dark. A depth that swallowed light. The vibration intensified, and for a single second, the hum stopped. Total silence. Worse than before. Because this time, the silence wasn't absence. It was expectation. Every head tilted a few degrees higher in unison, including mine. I didn't mean to, but I did. And in that instant, I understood. The animals had gone silent because they were conserving output, waiting for the correct harmonic density. Humans were louder, more numerous, more resonant. We were phase 2. And phase 3 wasn't destruction, it was opening. The fissure below pulsed once, faintly, in the same rhythm. 3. Pause. 2. Longer pause. And something from beneath pulsed back. The thing beneath the intersection didn't erupt. It didn't explode upward like something out of a disaster movie. It synchronized. The darkness inside the fissure pulsed once. Soft, patient. And the crowd answered immediately. The hum deepened, compressed, sharpened. It wasn't loud in the way a scream is loud. It was dense, like pressure packed into a frequency so tight it felt solid. The cracks in the surrounding building spread in clean, geometric lines, not chaotic fractures. Patterns. Perfect angles. Windows didn't shatter outward, they liquefied inward, folding into themselves like sheets of vibrating glass. No one ran. That was the worst part. No survival instinct. No chaos. Just alignment. The hum transitioned again, losing its staggered rhythm. The pauses dissolved. It became continuous. A sustained tone that made my spine feel hollow. I dropped to one knee without realizing it. The fissure widened enough to reveal depth. Not earth, not infrastructure, not magma. Movement. Layered, slow, deliberate movement like overlapping membranes shifting against each other. It wasn't a creature in the way our brains want to label things. It was structure. Immense. Recursive. Folding inward and outward at impossible scales. The darkness wasn't absence of light. It was absorption. And it was responding to us. The comet overhead brightened in sync with the mass below. Not a coincidence, not separate phenomena. They were two ends of the same instrument. The sky pulsed. The ground answered. We were the bridge. I forced my eyes away from the fissure and looked at the people around me. Their mouths were slightly open now. The hum wasn't coming just from their throats. It was coming from their chests, from bone, from resonance vibrating through rib cages like soundboards. I saw a man's sternum flex inward and outward unnaturally, skin rippling as if something beneath it was calibrating tension. He didn't react. His eyes were glassy, reflecting the comet's segmented glow. A woman near the center of the formation lifted both arms slowly, palms upward. Not in worship, in reception. The tone shifted again, higher this time, just barely brushing the edge of audible human range. And then something happened that made the word horror feel inadequate. People began adjusting. Not posture. Composition. Subtle at first. Spine straightening beyond normal curvature. Shoulders aligning with unnatural symmetry. Micro movements correcting imperfections. Teeth clicking softly as jaws repositioned. I heard a crack to my left and turned just enough to see a man's collarbone fracture cleanly under the stress of realignment. He didn't cry out. The bone shifted, settled into a slightly different angle, and the skin smoothed over it like clay being reshaped from the inside. The hum intensified in approval. That's the only word for it. Approval. The fissure pulsed brighter, not light, but density. The moving structure beneath extended something upward, not an appendage, a frequency spike. It hit the crowd like a tuning fork, striking crystal. Several people collapsed instantly. Not dead. Recalibrating. Their bodies convulsed once, sharply, then went still. When they stood again, their heads were angled perfectly. Perfectly. I tried to stand. My legs resisted. The pressure inside my skull wasn't pain anymore. It was alignment pressure, like a chiropractor adjusting a joint, except the joint was my entire nervous system. I understood then why the animals had gone silent. They were conserving energy, because this part required stability. Sound would have interfered. The human hum, unified, had reached coherence. And coherence opened something. The comet's surface split, not physically, not debris or fragmentation. Conceptually, like a lens focusing. The segmented ridges I'd seen earlier began rotating, locking into a singular orientation directly over the city. The hum became unbearable. Not loud. I can't emphasize that enough. It wasn't volume. It was precision. Every cell in my body vibrating in phase with an external structure older and larger than the planet. My teeth felt loose. My vision narrowed into a tunnel. And then, silence. Not absence. Completion. The fissure stopped pulsing. The comet dimmed slightly. The crowd stopped humming. Hundreds of people lowered their heads at the exact same moment. Inhale, exhale. Normal rhythm. Cars in the distance restarted. Somewhere, a siren resumed mid-wail, as if it had been paused. A phone rang. The city's ambient noise bled back in slowly, like someone raising a master volume slider. The fissure in the ground sealed seamlessly, leaving only a faint seam in the asphalt. People blinked, looked around, confused, disoriented. "What happened?" someone whispered. A man near me checked his watch and frowned, like he'd missed an appointment. There was no mass panic, no screaming, just disorientation, collective amnesia settling like fog. I looked up. The comet was still there, smaller, fainter, receding. My phone buzzed weakly in my hand. One final message from the unknown number. Phase 3, complete. I didn't respond. I couldn't, because I could still feel it. Faint now, dormant, not gone, like a muscle memory embedded deep in tissue. 3 pulses, pause, 2 pulses, longer pause. Weeks have passed since that day. News cycles moved on. Officials blamed a mass psychogenic episode triggered by atmospheric anomaly. Videos were scrubbed. The forum vanished entirely. Every dot onion link dead. Marcus never answered his phone again. Yellowstone's monitoring units came back online last week. The forests are loud again. Birds, insects, wolves. But when I isolate the low-frequency band, it's still there. Weaker, background, patient. The rhythm isn't counting down anymore. It's sustaining, like a carrier wave waiting for a new modulation. Sometimes late at night, when everything is quiet and I'm lying in bed staring at the ceiling, I have to consciously relax my neck so my head doesn't tilt upward on its own. Because the worst part wasn't the opening, it was how easy it felt to join. And if coherence could happen once, it can happen again. Only next time, we won't need a fissure to open. We already did.
The last part, about the synchronization, that's what haunts me. It's one thing to be afraid of something coming from the sky, but it's another thing entirely to realize your own body might be part of landing strip. I'm still tracking the frequency reading from my home setup, and honestly, the patterns are getting tighter every night. I'd love you to know if any of you have noticed that rhythmic silence where you live, or it's just me. Let me know in the comments. Stay safe, and thank you for listening to this one. I'll see you in the next story.